internet, my name is Lave and I watched Star Wars The Last Jedi for the second time, so it's time to do a spoiler review. Now I'm doing a spoiler review because I found it incredibly frustrating to do a spoiler-free review and air my disappointments with the film without actually going into specifics as to why I was so worried about giving away spoilers. So that's your warning. If you haven't seen The Last Jedi, then go away. Why did you click on this video? You shouldn't be here. Watch my spoiler-free review. Go and watch Star Wars The Last Jedi, then come back and tell me what you thought about it, because this is going to be full of spoilers. But I didn't just want to do a spoiler review. I wanted to offer some changes that I personally would have liked to have seen, which would have made my experience of it better. So without further ado, here are 4 ways to fix Star Wars The Last Jedi. Number 1, hide all celebrity cameos. So this is a pretty obvious one for me. I mean, after all, this is set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So I don't want to be sitting in a Star Wars film going, oh my god, there's Kate Dickie, there's Lily Cole, Justin Theroux, what's he doing there? I mean, Gareth Edwards' cameo, I was expecting. They publicised that Rian Johnson was in Rogue One, so I was expecting Gareth Edwards, but it's very Marvel of them. You know, it's like having Stan Lee in all of the Marvel films, but at least he created the Marvel universe. I mean, I didn't want that in Star Wars. I know The Force Awakens had celebrity cameos in them, but at least they were hidden. I wasn't sitting there going, oh my god, that's Simon Pegg. Oh my god, that's Daniel Craig. Celebrity cameos don't have a place in Star Wars films, in my opinion. The one celebrity cameo that did get a laugh out of me probably went over all of the Americans' heads, and that was Eddie from Bottom and the Young Ones. Even so, it still had the same reaction. I nudged my mate and I was like, it's Eddie, oh my god. So yeah, celebrity cameos bring me out of the film, so either hide them or plaster them in makeup. I don't want to see them in a Star Wars film. And that leads into my number 2 fix: get rid of all of the Marvel type humour. So this was easily my biggest gripe of the film. I mean, it starts off a bit shaky at first with the introduction of Poe, and he's facing down the First Order in their dreadnought in his single light fighter, which is a great action set piece. I will give the film that, but it's everything before it. When Poe calls Hux over the radio, and I think they say that he's tooling around with you, I didn't find that funny whatsoever. If you compare that to Poe's introduction in The Force Awakens when he first meets Kylo Ren and he says,
so who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
I think that is a much better example of well-judged humour that tells you everything you need to know about the character. He's defiant in the face of adversity, but he's not too cocky. In this one, it comes across as too sarcastic and he's a bit of a dick. Another example of the Marvel style humour is directly after that battle when Hux gets a hologram call from Snoke, and then Snoke is obviously disappointed with the fact that he lost the resistance, so he force slams Hux onto the floor and throws him around. That was very reminiscent of when Hulk smashed Loki. And I wasn't overly pleased with the treatment of the character of Hux. I mean, in the first one, in Force Awakens, he's over the top, but there is something quite maniacal in him. He's a ginger space Hitler. In this one, it goes way over the top. It's a bit too slapstick for me. But he does have one redeeming moment when he announces "Long live the Supreme Leader" when Kylo has completely lost it. I did like that scene. So those are just a couple of examples of the humour which I was a bit iffy about. The ones that really deflated me involve Rey meeting Luke for the first time and the infamous, I think it's going to be an infamous scene from now on, when Luke throws the lightsaber over his shoulder. Now everyone is jumping on this moment and are saying that it's a metaphor for what Rian Johnson is trying to do, disregarding and subverting our expectations, and I have no problems with him trying to do that, but it's his execution of it which I don't agree with. I personally would have found it much more emotionally engaging had Luke just handed back the lightsaber and said go away, either that or drop it, and Rey would have been like, what the hell? I imagine John Williams' score swelling up and then dissipating. It would have been an amazing moment, and ironically doing it like that would have still got the same message across. As I said in my spoiler-free review, I don't think Star Wars should be completely humourless, but I think the humour should be well judged. There is one line of dialogue which I did quite like when Luke says, "Jakku, that really is nowhere." I thought that was just about okay, but then it does continue when he starts to train her in the first time when she's sitting on that rock and he says, "Reach out," and then he tickles her hand with a blade of grass or a leaf. that didn't really work for me. But then everything that follows that, when he starts talking about the Force, I got goosebumps all over me. I absolutely love that. When it's accompanied with that gorgeous imagery, it's absolutely spot on. And of course, this eventually leads to the fact that Yoda comes back as a Force ghost. That is what my friend texted me the night before. I was sitting there, I'd avoided all spoilers, then out of nowhere this text pops up and I was like, dude, what are you doing? I was like, Vader. Despite the fact that Yoda returning was spoiled for me, it still was my favourite scene. I think that is when it was most reminiscent of the original trilogy, and Yoda's message is so great. Failure being the burden of true masters. That's so poetic. I absolutely love that. And it reinforces that Luke, who's obviously weary of the title of having this legend hanging over him, at the end of the day, he's still a normal guy. He makes mistakes, and I absolutely loved their approach to that. That was great. With all of that said, I actually wouldn't change any of Luke's arc or Kylo and Rey's interactions. I'd keep all of that stuff present and correct. I would just get rid of all of the humour. It does make me laugh that the professional critics are saying that this film is all about balance, and thematically it is, but it's the humour in this which undercuts the emotional moments for me that makes this film so unbalanced. Number 3, give us more on Snoke. First of all, I wasn't that upset that they did kill off Snoke quite quickly. What did frustrate me is that we didn't actually find out more about him. I mean, in the flashback scenes, when you see both perspectives of Luke and Kylo's argument, I really like that, by the way. But Luke does say at the end of the third flashback that ultimately it was because Snoke had tainted him, which is why he turned to the dark side. And the fact that they did use flashbacks, but they didn't use it to explain more about who Snoke was and how he met Ben and why he wanted to turn him to the dark side, without finding out who, how, or why he's doing what he's doing, it did frustrate me quite a bit. And I just get the sense that Disney are saving that for a book, which I'm probably not going to read. But hey, merchandising, right? Going back to those flashback sequences, I can see why hardcore Star Wars fans are pissed off, because it's completely out of Luke's character. But I'm chalking that up to the fact that he is fallible. He makes mistakes. I mean, he's a Skywalker after all. He's susceptible to the dark side, and he had a fleeting moment, but ultimately he didn't go through with it. So yeah, I was okay with that, and I was okay with the fact that Snoke died, because it does ultimately lead to the best action sequence when Kylo briefly teams up with Rey. I absolutely love that sequence, and when you think he's going to be good, he then turns to the dark side completely, and you truly see how lost he is. That was such a great scene. I did enjoy that. As I say, I've thought about this a lot, and I would predominantly keep Luke's character arc the same, and I would keep most of Kylo Ren and Rey's character arcs the same. Maybe I wouldn't have gone so deep into the Force and take liberties with what it could do, but then it does make sense by the end, which I will come to. It's the other half of the film where I would make major changes, which is number 4, get the resistance to planet Crate, or the mineral planet, sooner. So I think this is something we can all agree on. I mean, even in the positive reviews, they all say that Finn and Rose's character arc is completely redundant, and Poe, Leia and Holdo's parts of the story are just full of plot holes, and it completely is. I mean, running out of fuel has never been a problem in any of the previous Star Wars films, and it completely doesn't make sense that the First Order, who are right on top of them, would just then hold back for no apparent reason. I mean, the reason they give in the film is that the Dreadnought, or whatever it's called, is slower than their ship, but then they're surrounded by Star Destroyers, and we've seen in previous Star Wars films that they pursue smaller and faster ships. But the plot detail that really got under my skin, and the more I think about it, the more it collapses under its own logic, and that's to do with the whole tracking thing. I mean, the fact that the First Order have one room with one bit of technology on one ship to track their fleet didn't really make sense to me, especially when Leia has a tracking dot this size and she gives one to Rey, and that enables Rey to find out where they are. So it just completely collapses. I know everyone is saying that this is an incredibly written film. I mean, in terms of dialogue, then yeah, I'd absolutely agree with them. But in terms of plot structure, there are so many gaping holes, which I picked up on my first viewing. That's bad writing, I'm afraid. So how would I fix it? Well, I'd actually scrap the entire running away from the First Order section. That's running away at snail's pace. It's literally like, oh, we gotta get away, we gotta get away. I would have the Resistance light speed straight to this planet Crate and get there straight away. I'd scrap the entire tracking bit. I'd get rid of Finn and Rose's journey to that gambling planet, and I'd actually play up more and make use of Benicio del Toro's character, DJ. So the way his character plays out in the film is that they find him in prison. It turns out he's also a code breaker, but then he sells them out to the First Order. Now I think it would have been much more potent had he already been in the Resistance, so already working alongside Poe and Rose, and then he sells them out. And I think that would have been a nice balance to Finn defecting to the Resistance from the first one, and now he's defecting to the First Order in this one. That is what you call balance. Drop the mic. Either that, or I would have made him like a caretaker on the planet Crate, so he's on that planet supposed to be looking after the weapons, but then they arrive and it turns out that he's actually selling those weapons, which plays up to Rose's preachy comment about people profiting from war. I think that would have made more sense. And then he sells them out to the First Order and he actually tells them where they are, as opposed to that whole tracking business. For me, that brings all of the core messages that Rian Johnson is trying to say into one place. I think it would have shortened the film by about 2 hours. I mean, I was playing with the idea of keeping Finn in a coma. I think that would still work. That's even ballsier than what he does. But crucially, I would have kept all of the events that happened in space with Poe and Holdo actually happen on ground, with Poe actually scrambling around, being a hothead, trying to set up a last line of defense, while Holdo and Leia, I don't know, are maybe saying something like, there are alternatives to fighting. In this scenario, I think all of the key messages that Rian Johnson was trying to deliver are still all intact, but at the same time it would streamline everything. I think it would ramp up the tension and suspension as they're trying to figure out who this spy is. They're trying to mount their last line of defense whilst bickering with each other, and you can still have it play out the same way with Luke turning up to save the day. Maybe play up the fact that Rey helped him with their Force connection. Maybe, I don't know about that, but it still keeps the core message of letting the past die, killing it if you need to, and then inspiring the next generation. That's it. The only negative I can think of by doing it this way would be that you don't get introduced to that kid on that gambling planet, but then you don't need to. I mean, arguably you don't know who this kid is anyway. It's just that he's inspired and the Force has awoken within him and he's going to be the next generation of Jedi. It's still the same message. So that's my thoughts on Star Wars The Last Jedi. I know I've already shown my enjoyment tracker, but I think with these changes it would actually be up here. So there it is. That's my spoiler review for Star Wars The Last Jedi, and 4 ways that I personally think if they had implemented, it would have made it a much more enjoyable experience for me. But what do you guys think? What would you have changed? Would you have kept it exactly the same? The biggest question we have now is, where do we go from here? I mean, the biggest question is, how are they going to handle Leia, because they didn't do anything to help explain why she's not going to be in episode 9. I mean, I would be disappointed if she's written out in the scrolling text. That would be a shame. I am still interested in where they're going to take it for episode 9. I think the biggest question on my mind, which they haven't tackled in this at all, is what happened to the Knights of Ren. Surely they're still out there, and with Kylo Ren now the supreme leader, that could be interesting. My biggest hope though is that they stick to the decisions that they made in this film. I mean, I've had visions of Snoke putting himself back together like the aliens in Men in Black 2. If they do that, I think I would probably walk out of the cinema. And Rey, if she really is no one, then she should remain as no one. Don't, in episode 9, please don't say, oh, by the way, you actually are a Kenobi, or Qui-Gon Jinn's descendant. No, no, no. But absolutely, I would be interested to see what Kylo does next, and if he brings back the Knights of Ren, and with the new generation of Force users or Jedi, whatever you want to call them. I mean, that kid, what's he going to be called? Duke Air Sprinter. Yeah, come on, Duke Air Sprinter, let's do this. I do think it's kind of funny that everyone is praising this film for being so different, but when you really think about it, it brought us right back to the start with a deprived boy in a deprived area looking out to the stars. We all know how that turned out. So thanks very much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you can, give this video a like and don't forget to share the lave. Spunk. Subscribe.